welcome to our live SaaS Academy sessions. I'm Anna, your host, as always, and here we chat about all things SaaS and hopefully help you take your companies to the next level. So today we're here with Victor and David from Trust Shoring, where they provide strategic tech and product advisory, and of course Facundo, CTO of DeployBot, one of our beloved brands of SaaS Group, which allows you to automatically deploy files from your repositories to your apps. Wonderful. And today we'll be talking about product leadership and accountability for remote dev teams. So welcome to our little live show. And I guess I'll give you the mics to do a bit more of an intro, who you guys are and what you do. Victor, want to do the honors?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna. It's great to be here. I'm Victor, the founder of Trust Shoring. I've been building remote first software development teams for almost 10 years now, back when people didn't even know where certain countries are on the map that are now super popular to work with. I'm excited to share some of those secrets, answer any questions that you might have. And yeah, I brought a special guest with us, one of our fractional CPOs, and here he is. It's David.
Thanks, Victor, and thanks, Anna. I'm super excited to be here as well. My name is David. I have just over 10 years of experience in both user experience design as well as product management. As of late, I've been focusing a lot more on the product management and strategy side, more so than the UX side. But it's something that I am absolutely passionate about. So very much excited to answer any questions around UX, product strategy, prioritization, what have you.
Awesome. And Facundo.
Hello, everyone. So yes, my name is Facundo. I'm the CTO of both DeployBot and DeployHQ, which are the deployment tools we have in the SaaS Group family. I've been working on the SaaS Group for more like a year and a half, but I've been CTO of different startups for like 7 or 8 years. So I have done both, working like in a physical place, but also in remote teams. So yeah, hopefully I can share my knowledge here, and super glad to be here.
Super. Well, glad to have you all here, and we're live finally. So feel free to jump in with your questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll make sure to answer them all. But let's begin with the easiest one. How do I build a remote team that is easy to manage? Anyone has that answer? Please come forward.
Sure, it's obviously the easiest question you can have out there, right? It's so easy that we get asked that all the time, and it's obviously very a multifaceted answer, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no do this, go there, hire these people. But generally, there are things you can do to make it particularly hard to build a remote team and particularly easy to build a remote team. And if we go through just a couple of these, that would be, and that one applies to almost everybody. The smaller and more senior your team is, the easier it is to manage. I'll take 2 senior developers over 10 mid-level engineers, or God forbid, junior engineers only, any given day, and you don't need mid-management structures. You don't need, every single person that you onboard is another person that needs to get knowledge transfer, that needs to have the right culture. Every new person means that you have more meetings, you have more of all of that make teams less effective. So the most effective development teams are probably 2 to 3 people. Obviously, there are many times where you need to build bigger development teams, and that's okay. But the most effective per person is probably 2 and 3 people, where you get the most done. You need the least overhead. And obviously, there are a lot of tasks where senior engineers don't want to do certain things, so you add in mid-levels to help and whatnot. But generally speaking, seniority is key. Smallest teams are key. You don't need to stay within the same country, but keeping culturally and time zone wise things somewhat close is super helpful. You have a certain overlap of time. You don't work with cultures that you just don't understand in terms of how do you negotiate, how do hierarchies work, how does criticism work within a certain culture. If that is too far away, you just need to understand that to make sure you work that out well. What else? You want to look at team dedication. That is always a key. And what do I mean by that? If you have a full timer that works for you, that is always, there's more dedication. You get that thinking in the shower time or whatnot that you don't get from a freelancer or from a part-time person, simply because they don't have that dedication to you. So that is, we've worked with clients who had 8 freelancers working on things. And if you, again, simplify that down to 2 senior full-timers, much more effective, much more dedicated team. Um, if you have technical leadership in-house and you have product leadership in-house, it's probably easier for you to build your own team as opposed to work with a software house. If you don't have that and you struggle, it will be much easier for you to work with a software house that brings that process and the management with them. So these are just a couple of factors. I don't want to go into too much detail because that'll just break the show, and I could be talking about that all day. But effectively, these are just a couple of points that we can consider.
Sure. Facundo, how does it work for us at saas Group? How do you feel?
I think that we are pretty much aligned here in saas Group. We tend to be very small and senior teams in which we focused and we try to hire. Also because we are full remote, and as he mentioned, sometimes it's easier to onboard and to start working and collaborating. But it is also true that sometimes you need more junior profiles. And just want to add a note here, and whatever you are looking for a junior profile, you might need to kind of onboard a bit more and work towards more like more of a one-on-ones and follow up a bit more. Maybe for a senior role, we can expect to have. I don't know if we're talking about a developer in 2-4 weeks, we can have results. But if we're talking about the junior developer, we as managers, we have to be more involved. So that would be one of the things. And then to me, the word easy, it sounds like a bit weird because I don't feel it's always easy. We can say that it's well managed maybe, and as Victor was mentioning, it will depend because then every individual will be different, will have different motivations. And then as managers, I think that we should also work on that and try to harness or follow that motivation towards what we need. So that are my key points.
Okay, thank you. So I guess since we at saas Group like to work with bootstrapped companies, they're a bit smaller teams, leaner. Sometimes also something that I noticed talking with founders when they were describing how they got their team, especially their developers team. Um, it's a bit of a challenge for them to get more senior developers on board if they're just starting, they're bootstrap SaaS. So, what do you think, apart from salary, like they cannot offer huge salaries maybe at the beginning of the journey, what could be other benefits that senior developers would be attracted to?
Hmm. So what we see a lot, I mean, salary is always a factor and it always will be. The more senior you get, it always is one of the factors. But especially today, we see that the biggest factor in all of the interviews that we have, because we do recruiting for our clients a lot. And so what we see, the number one factor is actually remote work. And so most of, our audience is probably going to be like, hey, that's actually great, right? Because we all offer remote jobs, but you wouldn't even realize how much of a factor this actually is. You can fairly easily poach a person from a larger company by just offering them a remote job. So that's the first thing. Rather obvious, but then again, I think quite interesting. Then working on actually meaningful challenges having an impactful job, especially coming from a larger company, to work on something that you can do end to end. You can own it, you can release it, and you see the impact of that is huge. That is something a lot of developers really want to be doing. And the other thing, no matter how senior someone is, most developers really want to continue learning new things, improving their skills. So if they either have the time to do that or actually have somebody to learn from, maybe a very senior CTO or a fractional CTO or some other form of coaching, that is very attractive, and that's not very expensive to get oftentimes. So this is a huge benefit that is attractive to developers. Obviously, there's like work-life balance, but what also ties into the learning part is working on, and that unfortunately is super important. And I know for early stage bootstrap SaaS companies, this is a critical factor. It's the level of technical debt, right? So we like to start our companies with a lot of technical debt, and unfortunately, that is very true. It will be very hard to find good developers because the only thing that makes up for technical debt is salary, usually. Obviously, and a commitment to allow a developer to sort of refactor that. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion around that. What level of technical debt is okay? There are obviously developers who tend to overdo it, right? And be like, everything needs to be perfect. It does not. It doesn't make business sense always, but it is a very important factor. So code quality and the technology, if it's a common technology, popular technology, is important in a developer's decision-making process.
All right, I think it's the first time I've ever heard bootstrap SaaS and work-life balance in the same sentence, but well, could happen. Facundo, anything to add here?
I mean, I think it's a great point, because at some point, sometimes if you're a bootstrapped founder, you will not have as much money as a big corporation. So it's one of the things that you can manage, actually. But at the end of the day, I think that he mentioned something that I think is a very important point, and it's the fact that most likely we'll need generalists. We'll need people end to end. And in this, I'm not just talking about software, but also some other things. So, for example, here in DeployBot or DeployHQ, we also do support. So, for example, besides our main task on engineering and pull requests and code reviews and everything, we also are talking with customers. So I think that this is the kind of things or mentality in which we have on the bootstrap companies, and normally you won't have on a big corporation in which you are very specialized on a position, and maybe you are, I don't know, like a QA engineer or a software engineer, in which you have a very narrow scope and you are not like a generalist. So definitely that's one of the things. Some of the things is, I mean, it's true that sometimes you don't have the budget to compete against the corporate and players and so on. But as Victor was mentioning, I think it's a matter of convincing about the project, what you're doing, what's your vision, what you want to accomplish, and what are your plans. And I think that something that we have here on SaaS Group that is something good as well, is that we can give them a career progression. So it's like, it doesn't matter what are the positions that you're applying now and you're going to be starting, but then you can move like horizontally or vertically to a different positions, so you can grow within the company. So I think that's also something that we have in SaaS Group, and it's super good when we're hiring.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I think it's a great point. But since we're talking about being remote, and well, a lot of companies, especially when it was just the beginning of this remote revolution, they were not sure how to make sure that everyone is still efficient, and like how to communicate this with their teams. So, are there any metrics or like KPIs that you can use to really evaluate the efficiency of your development team, but at the same time make sure that they're not stretched too thinly, and there is still this psychological safety in their work?
I think in terms of those, there's probably two layers to that. One, hardcore KPIs. You can measure velocity. You can see how much did we get done of a sprint. What did we plan? What did we actually accomplish? Right. But the other matter is the actual productivity of each individual team member, and that I'm not convinced you can really have hard KPIs or metrics on that. I'd love to hear what Facundo, for example, says here as well. But what I feel is more of an accountability thing, right? Pay attention to onboarding, especially have a lot of one-on-ones. You'll see if somebody is actually doing things, pulling their weight or not, and then that usually continues. Need to make sure they stay motivated. That a bit of accountability, like stand-ups and things like that, to see if people progress. Obviously, nothing that some people suggest, like screen recorders. I think that's 10 years, 20 years behind, although we still sometimes get people or clients who ask for these things. But there needs to be a healthy balance between trust and some sort of accountability for sure. And then on top of that, to get a general sense of how things are going, if they're going in the right direction or just off the rails and we need to investigate, then you have things like velocity or percentage. If you have, I guess we'll get into that later on as well. But if you prioritize a backlog with Moscow, say, and you say, okay, our plan is to get 60 to 80% of this done. If we're in that range, perfect. If we're like only at 40%, then is this a one-off thing or does this keep repeating? If it keeps repeating, then we definitely need to take a look and get maybe some outside consulting and advisory on how to get a grip on our process and our team.
All right, Facundo.
I completely agree. I think that at the end of the day, it's a hard to measure. I don't think we have a unique KPI that we can follow. I think at the end of, I mean, it's something that we can use, like for example, the number of, I don't know, PRs that were created, of the code reviews and so on. But it's not the only thing that we can use. So at the end of the day, as Victor mentioned, we will have our ceremonies, our like daily stand-ups or whatever we need to do, and we will continue. And then we're gonna, autonomy is key here, and people will feel that trust that they will be delivering. At the end of the day, we cannot measure for sure how they are delivering, because I don't know, like sometimes we don't know. A feature might take 100 lines of code, and a bug fix might be just one, and the impact might be different as well. So it's not the unique thing that we can have in mind. I think it's something that, yes, it can help us to have KPIs and to compare and how it progresses, but it's not the only thing that we can do. But it's more of what's our plan, how we're progressing towards that plan, our prioritization, are we delivering the right features or not? Are these features having impact or not, etc.
Okay. All right. And as you know, as teams grow, who do you think should lead the development team? Is it product manager? Is it CTO, lead developer? And how in this case are the responsibilities are shared? David, maybe you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of who leads the development team, I would say it's kind of a combined effort across the CTO, the product manager, as well as maybe even the lead developer. And I think from a product manager perspective, they're leading the team, again, from that product perspective, setting that vision, setting and defining those priorities, and then ensuring that there's alignment along with customer needs as well as business goals. And hopefully, speaking back to like what Victor mentioned earlier, the Moscow method, right? The must-haves, the could-have, should-haves versus the won't-haves. And then so with all of those in mind, you're able to kind of get alignment on what the focus should be. And going into the CTO or the lead developer, I would say they lead the team from a technical perspective, not necessarily from a product perspective, although there's a tremendous amount of collaboration between the product leader as well as the CTO or the lead developer. But essentially, the CTO is making decisions around the technical architecture, the tech stack. Are we using the most common languages that are found to be attracting the high caliber developers that are out there, and then as well as the implementation details when it gets to the execution stage. But again, I think the responsibility is absolutely shared amongst these stakeholders. And ultimately, that alignment needs to be translated and communicated well down to the team who's actually executing on it.
All right, Facundo, how does it work for us? Do you
So
own all of
yeah,
it?
yeah, so basically that would depend on the size of the team. For most likely for bootstrapped SaaS companies, for example, whenever they are starting, the CTO will wear all the hats and will be the product manager, but also the CTO. So we will tackle down all the product areas, but also the technical aspects. But then whenever you start to grow, most likely you will need to specific like roles at least. Um, to cover that areas. And for example, the product manager will be more focused on and it will be the owner of the product, will own and will have all the knowledge and analytics and all the things that you need have there. Regarding how we do it here on SaaS Group, is a bit different because we have a central team, a product central team that provides to all the brands like a coaching. So, for example, in my case, product it resides within the team. It's not, we don't have a specific role for product manager, but we do work with the product central team that provides the help. But then it will depend on the brand. For bigger brands, most likely they will have a product manager that will be in contact with the product team as well. But then they will be measuring and having, of course, having one person that is only focused on that. It will be having a deeper look and having more like analytics and everything that you need on that sense. But as mentioned, I think that what's the difference between the CTO of the lead dev? Well, depends. If it is a small team, most likely it will be the same person, right? So whenever you start to grow, the CTO will have to, I don't know, tackle down more areas like more strategic or vision or that kind of things, and then the lead dev will be more on the architecture or how we are gonna structure the code and everything else. So at the end of the day, that's the thing. It depends the size of the team and how it will evolve. For us in SaaS Group, I would say we are in general small teams. So, for example, we do have a CTO normally, and then if the size is if the team's growing, then we'll have a product manager, but that will be it.
Okay.
I just want to quickly jump in here because this is extremely interesting. We are getting a lot of questions around that particular issue, ad trust shoring, and a lot of clients come to us who are growing fast and they're transitioning from that small, lean CTO-led team to a bigger team, and they're really struggling. The central function, like a really good CTO product manager combination or CTPO, is extremely rare. So I think that is extremely cool how that's working out for you guys. This is very good. That is a very rare person, and most of the time we see that the CTO or the tech lead at the given moment is not a good people person. They're excellent in their field, but not a great people person. And that's where things then start going south once this goes beyond this very intimate small team of developers. And oftentimes people come to us and they say, well, I need a better CTO. Yeah, no. You have a great tech lead. What you need to understand that most of the time, unless you have that unicorn, the tech lead decides how we build things, but what we do, when, in which order, and how that is being delivered resides with product. And that's the function you need to build out and improve and get the project management function under this as well. But you don't force your CTO to manage delivery because that is one of the very common mistakes that people make.
All right. Thank you for more details. But in product leadership, does data play any role, and like what data should be collected, and what is kind of the easiest way to do that? David?
Yeah, I would say data plays a critical role in informing product decisions. The data is how you're going to go about measuring success, identifying those key areas of improvement. Even customer feedback should be considered as, data, right? And so you want to continue to collect that data. You want to have this continuous mechanism by which you are continuously bringing that in, not only at the, within the product team, but proliferating that information to the rest of the organization so that everyone is understanding of what it is that we're building as well as the why behind what we're building here. And then again, to Victor's point, it's the CTO who then comes in and says, how are we going to build this? And so again, I think data should absolutely be part of a product manager's day-to-day in terms of them monitoring what's happening, making sure that they're looking at the user frequency, the feature adoption, and then looking to get continuous feedback around customer feedback through NPS or surveys. And then finally, some of the business metrics like revenue or churn rate and retention rate, right? In terms of how you go about bringing that data in, Google Analytics, I would say, is a good place to start. At the organization I'm at now, we're using Mixpanel. And Mixpanel I found to be pretty easy to use. We're able to create these custom reports that are actually specific to each of the squads that we have in our organization. So product has a different view versus engineering versus marketing, so on and so forth. And so this is a tool that really encourages every individual in the organization to keep that bookmarked in their browser and keep it up throughout the day. Because there are oftentimes conversations that we have in Slack saying, hey, why is it that our MAUs dropped from 40,000 down to 30,000 this month? Or why is it that we're seeing a tremendous spike week over week, right? And so those are some of the indicators that these tools are going to allow you to be abreast of, and then encourage further conversations to understand why it is that those things are happening.
All right, thank you. Facundo, do we collect any data?
Yeah, so
better decisions?
my 2 cents in here is that we do have also a central data team which provides at least the basic numbers that we have across all the brands, and in which we can see all the MRR, like ARR, churn rates and everything. So as David was saying, is something that we have to monitor. This is, for example, something that before I was a kind of a CTO, but I'm more focused on technology, and maybe I was not following the business metrics. But this is something that I really do on SaaS Group, because to identify if there is a problem, or I don't know, like if we had an issue with the renewals or with something, like the data will bring you light, right? Because you will be able to see it like right away if something is wrong or not, or maybe, I don't know, maybe something that's going up that you want to understand why it's going up, right? So at the end of the day, I think that the data is critical to understand what's happening with the business. And so one thing would be the data we can, for example, gather from the database and so on. And then, as David was mentioning, having also analytics, we use mixed panels as well, having product analytics, so we can understand a bit more about the usage of the product and how, for example, is how users are onboarding different features, or how they are feeling, or even using it. For example, we use some external tools to gather like feature requests, or even to publish change logs, so they can see what we are adding to the product. They can, for example, submit a new feature and then vote whenever they think it's something important or not. So all these things is on one side is they're giving us information, data that we can use, and then also we are creating engagement with the users. So yes, this is something that we should follow and continue doing, so we can even learn more about our product.
I was just going to say one more thing to add there. I think as a product leader, a lot of your job actually revolves around expectation setting with the stakeholders, right? As well as people management. And so when it is that you have a lot of data that you're sitting on, and you are then able to drive insights from that data, what it actually helps with is the storytelling aspect and the alignment via that storytelling, right? And so stakeholders who may not understand the whys are going to understand the whys if you present them with the data and then tell a narrative around that. And so for me, that's been a very much of a tool that I've used if I've gone into issues with, say, the CTO or even the CEO, and I'm coming to them with market data, but they don't necessarily understand it. So then I have to go back and then try to figure out how it is that I'm going to try to create this narrative that is as accurate as possible and in line with their business needs. And I found that to be a really good tool to kind of, again, get that alignment.
Okay, great point. So we were talking quite a few times here about technical due diligence, and one of the grave sins that was mentioned there is when a company wouldn't have a roadmap. So how do you build like a clear, at least 6-12 month product roadmap? David, want to start with this one?
Oh man, that's a tough one. So when you say a clear roadmap, it is probably going to be clear when you first create that roadmap, but then it's going to become more and more opaque as you continue to go down that path. And so that is a signal that should tell the leadership team that, hey, this roadmap, while we may have worked on it 2 quarters back, we need to have a routine by which we revisit these, right? Starting out with first understanding what the company's strategic goals are and how that aligns with the customer's needs that you're actually serving. One of the frameworks that I love to use is the OKR framework. You can use, objectives and key results. You could even use the WIG, wildly important goals, whatever that framework might be. The outcome needs to be that, there needs to be goals at the company level, at the department level, and then at the individual level. And they all need to ladder up to that overall company level. And so as you're identifying these key themes and the priorities based on the market research that you're doing, the customer feedback that you're gathering, as well as the analysis of that data, you need to continue to collaborate with these stakeholders to then align on these priorities and ultimately ensure that buy-in is actually happening. And then upon getting that alignment, you're able to now break down that roadmap into achievable milestones and then have those be reflected in your sprint cycle. But again, right, roadmap may be clear, but then it's going to become more opaque. So I would encourage everyone to try to revisit their roadmap once a quarter at the very minimum. And for me, I would say even within the quarter, my roadmap changes from time to time because we're getting feedback from customers that we do need to be nimble and act on very quickly, right? Because these might be incredibly important from a business standpoint that we just weren't aware of even a week or two ago. And so those are things that we have to jump on, these opportunities. And so in that sense, the roadmap should be flexible. And I think a lot of the pitfalls is sometimes teams stick to the roadmap just for the sake of sticking to the roadmap and then realize, oh, we've built something, but we're not actually getting traction. Well, it's because you were actually getting feedback that what you were working on wasn't going to work, but you continue to do it anyways. And so, yeah, just again, continuing to monitor those pieces in the roadmap is extremely important.
All right, Facundo, how does it work for us? Do we have a clear roadmap?
At the end of the day, I think it's as we said, and maybe for the roadmaps we can tell the same. It's like fail fast, right? So the same principle we apply on the MVP, we can apply it for any feature. So we can measure if we have the proper adoption and if the users are it's something they want, right? As David was mentioning, for example, internally we have a quarter check up with the board in which we present the business and the metrics and what's the plan. So we are kind of doing this, like following the plan, but also checking how we're going. And then if it is something is wrong or something we want to change it, then we think we can take another direction. And here something else that I would like to add is that sometimes maybe because I'm an engineer from engineering background, whenever we're doing the roadmap, we forget about the technical depth, for example. But this is something that we really need to take to have it in mind, to keep it in mind. And sometimes in order to move faster, we need to invest time on engineering. We need time to refactor. We need time to rebuild stuff. So it's something that I'm not saying that we're going to be blocked a quarter doing a refactor, but sometimes we need to do it in order to allow us to go on the direction that we want to. So it's something that, yes, it should be in the roadmap as well. Maybe it's not something that we're delivering to the users, so we might need to find out what are the things that we're going to be delivering in order to still continue delivering value. But then at the end of the day, we know this is a proper call, and that this will allow us to, I don't know, like move faster, or I don't know, change the technology, or do whatever we need to do.
Yeah, on the changing roadmaps, I think it's always interesting, especially when you look at, you mentioned due diligence, right? Where you look at an early stage, pre-revenue, pre-product company, pre-seed, pre-everything, and they just have an idea, but the investor says, please create a 5-year roadmap, right? And business plan and finance plan. And it's like, uh, that's going to change, right? But I guess the point is, and you know that better than I do because you're acquiring businesses all the time. Um, but the point is not in making somebody stick to that 5-year plan, but rather given the information you have today, right? Are you able to create a strategy to move forward? That makes sense for today, for the info that you have. But at the same time, when any of that inputs change, well, obviously you need to adjust. And so the investor will invest in a team that is capable to, given the information they have, create a roadmap forward. But obviously, nobody expects them to then do exactly that because everybody knows that information will change. Does that make sense of sorts?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, but obviously, a company would have like a long-term kind of product vision, and
Sure.
then some feedback from their customers that are kind of like, we want this problem to be solved right here, right now. How to balance customer needs and your product vision, and if there is maybe some simple prioritization framework to follow here that would help with it.
Yeah, I think one of the pitfalls that I've seen a lot of development teams fall into, and even product teams fall into, is prioritizing based on who the loudest voice is, whether that be a stakeholder's voice or whether that be a customer's voice, right? And oftentimes, a customer may come to you and say, "I want X, Y, and Z." But what they actually need might be something completely different, right? And there might be one solution that actually solves for all three of their problems versus how they're going about the solutioning process. And so, again, going back to the prioritization framework, I love to involve all of my team members as much as possible, and I take them through a FigJam template or a Miro template that I put together, where starting out in the workshop, it's typically time bound to 45 minutes. And within the first 5 minutes, we review everything in terms of the insights that were gained from the research that we've done. And then we then have the team members review those, align on it, leave comments on it in terms of what their response is. And then we then start moving those stickies individually into a 2x2 matrix of that level versus that level of effort versus the value. And then what we then focus on after conversing about those things, and things are going to shift around from one quadrant to another as engineering chimes in around the feasibility, around the implementation, and then product chimes in and UX chimes in and says, no, like this is actually breaking away from our pattern or what have you, right? And so all of these conversations lead to a more foundational knowledge or a common set of knowledge. And then we align on, okay, let's focus on the ones that are of the most high value and the lowest effort. And the high value, the way that that's determined could be high value to the business or high value to the customer. And so with those conversations is how you kind of determine what you want to focus on. And then um, the outcome of the meeting essentially is you come out with at least about 3 to 5 things that you want to focus on. And those might be different levels of complexity, right? So if things are way too complex, you want to start now decomposing that one sticky into many stickies to then be able to translate those into user stories. And then as you're writing these user stories in the perspective of the user, you are helping every team member like build up that empathy, right? And so in that sense, that provides that buy-in, that ownership, that accountability. So that's how I typically go about prioritization.
All right, Facundo, how do you go?
So yeah, so here, as I mentioned, normally we would use the product central team. We have used RISE method to kind of prioritize and to follow up what are the features that we're going to be focused on. But one note that I wanted to add here is that something that David was mentioning, but sometimes we need whenever we have an epic that is too big, like group of user stories that we want to implement. Something that works pretty well that I've done in the past is that to write down a specification, as we were doing 20 years ago or so, not very detailed, but more like a vague and ambiguous thing. But the thing is that at the end of the day, it will allow us to discuss, as David was saying, with the team. So we can discuss technicalities, things, how we're going to address it. And then out of that, we can build that like user stories. User stories is the unit that we're going to take and then develop and then make it kind of part of the product, right? So I think that involvement, like creating this involvement with the team, and they can kind of understand and create the commitment around that, is something that we should be doing. And everyone should be kind of getting this sense that we're part of it, and it's not something that is coming from like someone, but it's also something we've created. So yeah, I'm completely, I agree with what David said.
Okay, thank you. So, well, since we're talking obviously about SaaS, right? What are the common pitfalls that SaaS founders should avoid when prioritizing their product backlog?
I think
David,
I'm going
you
to go
want to
back
start?
to the
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the pitfall that I mentioned earlier, which is prioritizing based on the loudest stakeholder or customer, and doing that without that data to support the decision, right? Some, UX research teams love to quantify everything, right? Whether it was a qualitative insight, they want to quantify it. And I think another pitfall to taking that approach is when it comes to stakeholders who actually wasn't part of that research, and all they're seeing out of that research is this like 1 page report that you might be sharing with them. What they get anchored on are the numbers that you say, right? So if you say 3 out of 5 participants said that they would do X versus Y, or 90% of the participants said this, but really your sample size was maybe 5 people. You can't necessarily quantify that and use that as kind of your source of truth, because that could be very much misleading. It's not statistically significant, right? So understanding when it is that you need to present your insights in a qualitative way versus a quantitative, or a combination of the two, is extremely important, and is something that one should avoid. In terms of, again, like always quantifying everything.
All right, Facundo, is there anything that you're avoiding?
Yeah, so in my side, I would say something that normally we would be focusing a lot. It would be more on the onboarding. Like, for example, we will be having metrics, data, funnels, dashboards, whatever, regarding the onboarding. And then sometimes we forget about the churn, right? And how and why the churn is happening. And we have to understand that the onboarding, yes, is crucial, is super important, but the churn and the retention of those customers is also very important. And maybe we should have the very same data analytics and everything that we have on the onboarding. So I think that this is something that on the early stage in a SaaS business, you might not have it, or you might not be thinking about, but it's as important as the onboarding. So I think that at the end of the day, it's kind of the whole thing, because what the matter the most is the MRR, right? So we have to keep it. Once we gain the customer, we want to deliver value and to keep that customer happy, right?
Okay. So as we're coming to the end of it, we still have one question that I would love to ask you guys. If you can all share a hack that you use to actually build a great remote team with a great culture, and your best way to communicate your ideas to your developers. Victor, want to start with this one?
Absolutely. I think, especially with remote teams, and especially when people use, for example, software houses or freelancers, they forget one very crucial aspect, which is sharing context and business info. That is hands down the easiest way to get buy-in and get people to think on their own, because that is what you want. You don't necessarily want, you might have to, if people are not dedicated to really document everything to every tiniest piece of interaction. But the easiest ways to avoid that and actually have people who can think on their own and implement things is by giving background on customer personas, by giving background on the business, on the customer's problems, on your business strategy. People shy away from that with, for example, software houses or freelancers, but there's really nothing to lose that we can see and only a lot to gain. And I'll drop in the second hack, which is even if it's freelancers or software houses, visit them in person, because all of that knowledge transfer that I just said happens when you have a beer with those people. And it absolutely works. And every single client of ours who's done it says, why have I not done this earlier? Because everything has changed. So that would be my second hack.
Okay. One hack should always have a beer in it. So thank you. I totally support you. David, what do you think? Any hacks?
So Victor actually took it right out of my mouth. I was just going to mention remote
Sorry.
happy hours. No, it's all right. Remote happy hours, I've found to be extremely successful in building camaraderie amongst your team members. And if you have camaraderie, it's just easier to execute on the goals that you have. And then the second part is just empowering the team with all the information that they're going to need to understand why it is that they're doing their work. And so again, like these are some hacks that seem like duh probably to some people, but oftentimes it's just not prioritized by the manager or what have you. So just keeping that in mind, right? Again, it's that relationship building that makes the work that much easier and ultimately really fun for everyone involved.
Thank you. And just in case, we're all here for mindful consumption of alcohol. So, Facundo, what's your hack?
Yeah, I agree with the Victor and David. I think that the in-person contact is something that we cannot rely on a webcam or whatever we're using. But it's true that, for example, when doing the daily stand-ups, we can have kind of a bit of focus on what we're doing and what we're working on, but maybe talking a bit more on the personal aspects. It will create a bond like between people, and this is something that, as mentioned, it can be a bit more of relaxing and creating a bit of more of an atmosphere in which we feel more, as you mentioned, as this psychological safety, right? We are not afraid of sharing a doubt or something that I don't understand, or something maybe I don't think is the proper way to go, or maybe I want to understand. So I'd say one is this, and then be clear, be transparent with people, and as long as they can understand why and why are we doing this, I think that would be motivation enough to say, hey, okay, we're all aligned and we're going all in the same direction.
Okay,
One
beautiful.
last thing
Thanks so
to
much.
add there.
Yes.
One last thing to add, I think it's super important is like try to build this culture of gratitude in your organization. I was part of an organization in the past where every Friday we would meet as the entire team, and then we would have this Miro board template, and we would be given 5 minutes to write down stickies and put it on another team member's little templated page, saying, "Hey, like I feel really grateful for you this week because you helped me get unblocked." By providing me with something, right? And so it is an arduous, like a rigorous process, I would say, because often, like sometimes you actually struggle to try to come out with the gratitude for a team member, right? And you feel bad if you're giving gratitude to 7 of your team members but leaving one out, right? But that kind of exercise still helps that camaraderie, and people really feel appreciated when they hear, even the smallest, pieces of appreciation. So I found that to be very, very good in terms of kind of, again, like bringing the team closer together.
All right. Absolutely love when it's, hands-on advice. So we could actually try that next time when we have like saas grouping or something. But on that note, we're actually going to have a session about psychological safety and building good relationships at work. It's going to be live sometime soon. So seems like an important topic. But thank you so much, guys, for a conversation. I mean, there were quite a few more questions to discuss, so I guess we'll have to do it sometime again. But thanks for all the insights that you've shared. It's been an absolute blast to have you here.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Anytime.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much, Anna.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you and take care.